We came to a forest today in order to review this. I finally got my hands on a Mercedes-Benz G-Class, and this is quite an occasion for me because I've been chasing this as if it was my white whale for quite some time now. And today we are going to talk about what this car can do, what it was created to do, and what it is actually doing in the worldwide landscape. The G-Wagon doesn't need any introduction from me. This is if you think about all the cars in the world, this is probably one of the most instantly recognizable ones ever. And that's mainly because this car hasn't had its design changed in over 43 years. Yes, Mercedes-Benz did alter a thing or two on it. They changed the shape of the headlamps slightly. They changed the grille shape and so on, ever so slightly. But overall, the design of this car is largely unchanged ever since this was initially launched back in 1979. Because this was created by Magna Steyr in Austria initially as a military vehicle. And it was supposed to be an extremely versatile car that was focusing mostly on the practical side of things, not on the design side of things. However, this car proved to be so good in off-roading that farmers started buying it a lot. And its boxy shape and no compromise design has attracted a lot of attention from regular customers. And Mercedes-Benz noticed that there was an opportunity there, and they created a car for the masses. And that's how we got the G-Wagon. As I said, over time its design didn't change all that much. And up until 2018, so starting back in 1979 and up to 2018, this car was riding on basically the exact same platform as it was when it was launched. So it had been in production for such a long time, but it was still using the same underpinnings. It's a ladder chassis setup with two live axles, one for the front wheels and one for the rear ones. That was the choice picked back in 1979 because that's the best way to create an off-roader. That's why the Jeep Wrangler, for example, still uses this setup to this day. However, in 2018, Mercedes finally recognized the fact that most of the customers don't actually use this car for its off-roading capabilities. Most people just buy it because over time it has changed from its initial purpose of being an incredibly capable off-roader into a posh city vehicle and more of a status symbol, if you will, because whenever you see someone driving one of these, you immediately know that we're looking at a successful person. Why? Because buying one of these cars is largely reserved for very rich people because they are incredibly expensive and they are not exactly perfect for inner city usage. They are incredibly capable for all sorts of situations, and those who buy these cars are doing it to say something, to make a statement. Basically saying, I'm buying this car for all of its capabilities, but I'm only going to use it around town like I would a Nissan Micra, for example. Because I can afford it. And I don't care what you think, but I can afford this car and everything that comes with it, because it's not easy to live with it inside the city. And yet, I'm gonna buy it because I can. Quite an interesting take. Now let's get back to this particular car. This is my first road test with the G-Wagon. And yeah, I kind of get the appeal now. I still don't like its shape. I think the design is, let's say, conservatory is a compliment at this point. As I said, it was largely unchanged. It's very boxy, very imposing. Looks unlike anything else on the road today, especially now as we're entering the electrified era. And every single car out there has to be as streamlined as possible to eke out as much range as possible from the battery. Well, this car doesn't really care about that. I don't really even know its drag coefficient, but it's like driving a brick or launching it into space and expecting it to arrive at the other end unscathed and doing 500 miles an hour. This is a brick on wheels. And that's what it attracts a lot of people. I like the fact that Mercedes kept a lot of elements intact. For example, it kept the round headlights, and now we have daytime running lights of a circular shape around them. I like the fact that they kept the turn signals over here on the front fenders, because these are the fenders, this is the hood, and once again this is another fender over here. So they kept this intact. They also kept the tail lights intact. They kept the spare wheel hooked to the rear tailgate. They kept the visible hinges on the doors. They kept the handles, for example. We've gotten used to having active handles. Basically, you pull on the handle and the door opens. But on this car, you have to actually press on the button next to the handle in order to get the door open. And they kept a lot of stuff overall because they wanted to create a car for the modern age, but also keeping very much in touch with the original, because they knew that customers were appreciating this exact design. The bigger changes happened under the sheet metal though, and we're going to talk about those once we get behind the wheel. For now, let's step inside and see how this car presents itself inside the cabin. Once you climb into this car, because yes, you actually have to climb in it because it is incredibly tall, you realize a couple of things. First of all, you're sitting really high. You have a 25 centimeter ground clearance. And not only that, but the car is built on a ladder frame chassis that actually raises everything up a bit more. And you are sitting incredibly high. This car is incredibly big, and you're making an impact wherever you go. And people will be looking at you wherever you go at any time. A bit on that later on. Let's talk about the technical side of things. Well, for about 40 years, this car was running on the same platform as when it was initially launched, because Mercedes-Benz wanted to keep its off-roading pedigree intact. So we were talking about two live axles, one on the front wheels and one on the back, of course, that turned this G-Class into a master at crawling just about anywhere. However, that setup doesn't make cars incredibly comfortable, and apparently Mercedes finally realized that most of its customers don't really use this car for off-roading, but mostly around town, and customers were actually looking for a bit more comfort and a bit more grace from their G-Wagon. So for the 2018, the second generation in 43 years, Mercedes decided to give this car a independent multi-link suspension up front. The rear is still a live axle for off-roading purposes. But the change up front means that this car is a lot more comfortable right now. It's a lot more refined and offers you a lot more comfort. Furthermore, this car gets, as I said, 3 locking differentials as standard, and that means you will not have any issues whatsoever in taking this thing in off-road. So the departure angle is 31 degrees, the approach angle is 30 degrees. You won't have an issue whatsoever. The breakover angle is 26 degrees. It is one of the most capable off-roading cars ever made. And yet, I don't think that's the point of this car. I could go on about how good it is off-road and how capable it is, but I would say 1% of the people buying it will actually take it off-road for a number of reasons. First of all, it has become a status symbol, so its main purpose has changed a bit over the years. Second of all, it is so damn expensive that you won't be risking I don't know, hitting a fender or curbing a wheel or I don't know, hitting anything on the underbody with it whenever you're going off-road, because it's very expensive. So people actually buy it, but they don't really use it as it is supposed to be used. So let's talk about that a bit. How is it while driving around town? Well, it's pretty difficult to use it around town, especially in the busy cities we have today, because it wasn't really meant to do that. It's big, it's wide, it's tall. You might have an issue getting into certain parking lots because it is so damn tall. So that means you'll probably have a hard time driving this car around town. Parking is hard, especially since the parking sensors don't really take into account the fact that you have a huge fifth wheel attached to the rear side of this car. So parking is hard, but not only because of that, but also because this car is huge. It will lean a lot, it will understeer a lot at higher speeds. On the highway, it is incredibly noisy, even though we have double glazed windows. Over 100 kilometers an hour, it will get really noisy because of this boxy shape. So it's really not that great as a car. It is brilliant as an off-roader, but then again, nobody's gonna take it off-roading because it's incredibly expensive, and so on and so forth. In terms of engine choices, you have diesels and petrol engines. Diesels are basically, it's one engine, it's a 2.9 liter straight six with 2 levels of power. The one we're driving is the G350D, which is powered by one of these diesel engines with 286 horsepower and 600 Newton meters of torque. No matter which one you get a 9-speed automatic gearbox with a torque converter. And also you have V8 engines on the petrol side of things. You have the G500 with about 420 horsepower, and you have the G63 AMG with about 600 horsepower, which is absolutely madness. So yeah, this car behaves as you would expect it to, and yet people absolutely love it. Even though it has all these shortcomings, people absolutely love it. And you have to wonder why. Well, during my time with the car, I actually got to understand why. It's because of the feeling this car gives you. When you're driving it, you feel like you could drive over anything. You basically feel invulnerable. You feel as if everyone in front of you is small, everyone should get out of the way, and you're treated as such because everyone lets you cut in, everyone lets you go in front of them, everyone looks at you. It's an attention grabber, this car. It's a rock star experience, if you will, because everyone will be checking you out. Everyone will be curious to see who is driving this G-Wagon. And that is why, in my book at least, and that's why I think everyone wants one of these cars, because of the feeling it gives you that's basically unrivaled by any other car. But if we're to talk about the rivals this car has, well, the traditional German manufacturers that are rivaling Mercedes-Benz on basically any other segment don't have a proposition in this space right now. I'm talking about BMW and Audi. None of them has a car equivalent to this. However, I would say there are two rivals for it. The Toyota Land Cruiser, it is just as capable as this one in off-roading, but it is not as luxurious, and it doesn't have the same status as the G-Wagon and the Land Rover Defender, which once again, it is just as capable as like this car, but it has independent suspension all around and air suspension on it, and I think it's even more capable in off-roading, but it's not as luxurious, and once again, it doesn't have the same status as this G-Wagon. Which one would I pick? I think I would go with the Defender, but that's only because I'm not a huge fan of this car's shape. I appreciate its performance while off-roading. I appreciate how it makes you feel, but it's just not for me. However, I would like to know if it is for you guys. So drop me a comment in the comment section below and tell me if this G-Wagon is actually one of your favorite cars, if you would pick it over the Defender or over the Toyota Land Cruiser. I am really curious to see what you guys think. That said, this has been my review of the Mercedes-Benz G-Class. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share, and of course subscribe. Until next time, don't forget to feed your passions. Ciao.